Welcome back to the Buce Plant channel, where we cover everything aquascaping and we try and entertain and inspire you along the way. My name is Logan, and today we are going to talk all about algae. Some of the common causes for algae, some of the different types of algae you might encounter in your planted aquarium, and then a bunch of tips to remove and prevent algae from your aquarium. So before we get started, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for lots more content like this. Now let's dive in. Okay, let's start off by talking about some of the common types of algae you are going to encounter in your planted aquarium. And it's important to know that algae is essentially omnipresent. These aquascapes that we keep are not sterile systems. They're constantly in contact with the atmosphere, your tools, plants come in and out, aquarium decoration comes in and out. And throughout this process, algae and bacteria are constantly being introduced into your aquarium. And one of the most common types of algae that you will encounter in your planted tank journey are diatoms, also known as diatomaceous algae. And diatoms are some of the oldest organisms on the planet. They existed over 1 billion years ago. Oftentimes, early in a planted tank's life, you get what's called a diatom outbreak. And diatom take the form of these sort of thin, slimy brown plaques that exist on your glass, your hardscape, your plants. They can exist on your snails. And they're nothing to fear. They look a lot worse than they actually are. They're super easy to spot remove, and they often exist because your tank is not yet balanced yet. So you'll have high ammonia spikes in the beginning, your plants aren't quite rooted and really thriving yet, maybe your light's not properly dialed in, maybe your nutrients aren't quite yet dialed in. So in order to remove it, we recommend just getting in there with a toothbrush and really scrubbing it away and being consistent with your water changes. And next up we have hair algae. And just like the name implies, hair algae is sort of a long filamentous green algae that sort of resembles long human hair. Once again, it typically spawns in tanks that are very new with high ammonia levels, and it's often hypothesized that hair algae is the result of some sort of a nutrient imbalance. Couple that with high lighting in a tank that's not yet mature, and it's really just a recipe for hair algae. So with hair algae, you really just want to get in there with a toothbrush and sort of wind it up. It's really easy to remove. It can just be a little bit of a pain in the butt since it really unravels itself between the leaves of plants. But the toothbrush is your best friend. Be on top of your water changes. If after a few weeks of consistent spot removal and maintenance aren't making a big difference, go ahead and lower your lighting and make sure that you're dosing nutrients consistent and that your CO2 levels in the tank are consistent. And next up we have green dust and green spot algae. And green dust algae typically takes the form of sort of a large film of dusty green algae. It's super common in brand new aquariums that don't have a lot of plants and maybe have large ammonia spikes and the beneficial bacteria is not yet established. By the way, if you want to learn all about how to safely and properly establish a planted tank by cycling it and establishing that beneficial bacteria, go ahead and check out episode 2 of our series. But green dust algae is nothing to fear. Once your tank is sort of mature, and if you're on top of those water changes and your plants are nice and healthy, it'll go away. As with the other types of algae, manual removal is your best friend. It can be a little bit tricky to get off the glass, but the Canvy algae scraper is gonna be your best friend when it comes to this. And green spot algae is somewhat similar. It exists, as the name implies, in sort of large circular spots. So these can exist on the leaves of plants, on the glass, on the hardscape. So nothing to fear. Take a toothbrush and really work it off the leaves of plants and it'll be gone in no time. And now it's time to talk about some of the more stubborn, more frustrating types of algae. So first up, we have staghorn algae. And staghorn algae are sort of these filamentous, thick gray strands that you'll often find on the leaves of plants. And they're fairly typical in newer aquariums that have some sort of instability. So too much light, not enough CO2, maybe excessive waste organics. And this type of algae can be very difficult to manually remove. So if you want a little bit of an edge, spot spot dosing it with some hydrogen peroxide, which fortunately in diluted, reasonable doses is perfectly safe for your aquarium, and that'll help weaken it. It'll eventually turn red. Whenever you see something like this, you want to ask yourself, okay, what is out of balance in my aquarium? Do I have too much lighting? Do I not have enough CO2? And Staghorn algae is typically a good indicator that something is out of balance. And next up, we have my personal arch enemy in the planted aquarium hobby, and that is blackbeard algae, also known as BBA. And BBA is such a pain because it's incredibly difficult to remove and it can be incredibly stubborn. It's widely hypothesized in the hobby that it typically exists due to some sort of carbon dioxide imbalance in your tank in conjunction with high flow. Oftentimes with BBA, we have to resort to some sort of chemical treatment. And just like with the Staghorn algae, we recommend that you spot dose with some hydrogen peroxide. Be very careful with your delicate plants like mosses, and when in doubt, test it on one leaf before applying it to multiple leaves. But it's very important with BBA that you dial in your carbon dioxide. Make sure that you have consistent levels throughout the day and make sure that you have enough. Also, reducing the flow in the aquarium can sometimes help, but if all else fails, doing a blackout in your tank where you cover the tank with a blanket and make sure that it doesn't get any light, you stop dosing nutrients, you turn off the CO2, you turn off the light. This can help give you the edge in that battle against algae. And finally, we have blue-green algae, otherwise known as Cyanobacteria. So as the Cyanobacteria name implies, this actually isn't a type of algae, it's a type of bacteria. And it typically arises in the presence of high waste organics and low flow and low oxygen. So your dead spots where the filter isn't hitting, typically on the lower part of the glass, maybe right near your carpet, you might get these little plaques, and they're slimy and they smell really bad. And they can be harmful in large quantities. So it's important to deal with cyanobacteria as quickly as you can and be very proactive about removing it. You can siphon it out with some airline hose. You can sort of scrape it off the glass with the Canvey algae scraper. And if it doesn't go away, if it keeps coming back, which it can, cyanobacteria can be very stubborn and resilient. It's important to really take a look at your nutrient levels, make sure that there's not a lot of fish poop and waste and detritus building up over the week. Siphon that out every week, and then take a look at your flow and circulation, because once again, if you have those dead spots, cyanobacteria is going to accumulate. Okay, so now it's time to give you some basic guidelines for preventing algae in the first place. So we highly recommend that you take a holistic approach when attempting to prevent algae from taking a hold in your tank. And by holistic approach, we mean looking at the big picture. So it's really important that early on you dial in your lighting, you dial in your CO2, you're consistent with your nutrients, and you're consistent with your maintenance. In the beginning of your planted tank's life, do not be afraid to run your light conservatively. Purchase a light that you can trust. We have lots of great brands on the Buce Plant website that are gonna lead you in the right direction. If it does not have a built-in dimmer, purchase an external dimmer. This is gonna give you a nice window for error and allow your plants to mature and establish before algae can take hold. Healthy plants that dominate the tank are always going to outcompete algae, but when your plants are weak and they're not really thriving and maybe they're stressed, that's algae's opportunity to take hold and spread out. So you wanna make sure your plants are healthy. It's important that with new tanks, you're doing regular, consistent maintenance, especially in the beginning when that aqua soil is releasing ammonia. If you want to avoid large ammonia spikes, UNS Contrasoil is going to be the best solution for you. We carry that on the Buce Plant website. This leaches far less ammonia than some of the competing brands, so it's going to give you a little bit more of a safety net in the beginning of your aquarium. That said, it's still important to do consistent water changes in the beginning of the tank's life and maintain that for many, many weeks. Plant as heavily as you can afford from day one. By providing the aquarium with a ton of healthy plant mass, algae is just gonna have a really hard time outcompeting it. And the sooner your plants are rooted and can really thrive and take in those nutrients and grow and produce more plant, the better chance your tank is going to have against the arms race against algae. And when selecting plants for your new aquarium, if you're purchasing plants that have been grown in their submerged form which means underwater form, doing a bleach dip and quarantining them before introducing them to your tank can help prevent introducing nuisance algae. But if you want to bypass that process completely, you can use UNS tissue culture plants, which we carry on the Buce plant website. These are snail-free, pest-free, algae-free, and they're going to be a guaranteed great start to your planted tank. And finally, one of the most important methods to preventing algae from taking hold in your aquarium is to not change too many things at once. You really just want to make one change at a time, observe for a couple weeks, see if things improve. If they do, great, okay, ride that for a bit, but if not, then make another change. When you change multiple things at once, it's very difficult to imply what is correlated with what, and things just get confusing. So make a single change, sit back, observe for 2 to 4 weeks, and then pivot and go from there. Okay, so you've taken the holistic approach to giving your plants everything they need and really working hard to create a healthy ecosystem to prevent algae. Nonetheless, you still get an algae outbreak. It's okay, it happens to all of us. So here are some tips to remove algae if you do get an outbreak. Step 1 would be to lower the light. When in doubt, lowering the light a little bit will give you that safety net and that room to sort of plan and see what you can do to get rid of the algae. This will give you time to manually remove, and this will make sure you get ahead in the race. If you're running it at 80%, maybe try taking it down to 50%, give it a few weeks and pivot from there. Step 2 would be to examine your maintenance process. So if you're doing one 50% water change per week and you're still getting a lot of algae, this may be an opportunity to add an additional water change per week. So instead of doing one 50% water change per week, you could do 2 25% water changes per week. This helps reduce stress and water parameter changes to your plants, and it may let your plants stabilize and sort of get ahead in that battle with algae. If manual removal isn't serving you well, step 3 would be to do a little bit of chemical treatment. And while we do always recommend chemical treatment being the last resort, hydrogen peroxide in the aquarium is fairly benign and harmless to your fauna because it's selectively toxic, which means it's really only going to attack the algae and then it's going to disassociate into water and oxygen, which is harmless in the aquarium. So be very careful about this, but you can take a syringe and treat any problem areas. Hydrogen peroxide is especially useful in spot treating against blackbeard algae. And next up, take a look at your water circulation and flow. It's a very common beginner mistake to run an underpowered filter. So when in doubt, increase the flow and circulation on your filter. If you're running an external canister filter like the UNS Delta, you can increase the flow to make sure that water and nutrients and CO2 are spreading out more and getting to all the corners of your tank. But when in doubt, if that's not working, it may be time to upgrade the size of your filter or even add a second filter, and make sure that your inflow and outflow are positioned in a way that makes sure that the water is getting to all corners of the tank. Take a look at your fauna to plant mass ratio. So if you have a lot of fauna, meaning a lot of fish and snails and shrimp and algae eaters, and not a whole lot of plants, a lot of organic waste is going to build up and there won't be a ton of plant mass to absorb that. So when in doubt, you can also add a lot more plants. Floaters are great in the algae battle. We particularly love Philanthus fluitans. It's beautiful. It's known as the red root floater, and it's going to help not only block out excessive light, but also suck up some of those excess waste organics. You want to have a ton of plants and a very reasonable to small amount of fauna. And finally, as we've mentioned earlier in the video, manual removal in conjunction with the holistic approach and regular maintenance is going to be your best friend. So getting in there every week and removing problem areas, trimming off problem leaves that are infested with algae or dying off, all of these things working in conjunction with each other are going to help maintain a very clean planted aquarium where there isn't rotting waste organics. So that's about all the time we have for today. It is so important that you remember to take a holistic approach when you're dealing with algae. It's never a good idea to just put a band-aid on the issue. The algae will come back week after week if you don't address the root cause. Once you solve the root cause, things will stabilize and thrive from there. So do us a favor and let us know down below in the comments what your #1 tip is for preventing algae in your aquarium in the first place, because we'd love to hear from you guys. It's amazing that we can all share tips with each other and learn from one another. So this has been Logan with Team Buce Plant. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.